Hey, Eli here. Today I want to talk about colors. We're going to talk about Nikon, Canon, Sony, and Fuji. If you follow me long enough, you know that I prefer Canon and Fuji. They're my favorites, but over the last 15 years, I've had 8 years with Canon, then I had 2 years with Nikon, then I had 2 years with Sony, and in 2020, I switched over to Canon R5 and R6, and then 2021, I picked up a GFX 100S. So I've also used Leica, and yeah, so that's pretty much the span of my experience with different camera manufacturers. Colors are always changing in camera manufacturers based off their sensors. Every time they come out with a new sensor, things adjust a little bit, but what stays the same is basically their color science and how it's interpreted through Lightroom. I only use Lightroom, so that's my only experience. We always have Adobe Color is how it comes in default, and then each camera manufacturer has kind of profiles that you'll see in the JPEG options, and those are usually integrated into Lightroom as an option. So with Fuji, you've got this really pretty film simulations, and then with the other ones, you kind of have like standard or landscape or portrait, whatever they offer. So you can use those to create your presets, and I think that's where these camera manufacturers actually start to differ. If you're using Adobe Color, there's not a huge difference. It's subtle in RAW, but once you add those profiles in Lightroom, then you're going to see a pretty dramatic difference. Things are going to start to change over a span of images, hundreds of thousands of images as you're editing. You'll notice. So yeah, this is a 100%, well, 95% subjective, option or choice for people to pick their colors based off their preference. And so today I want to give you the tools to kind of pick for yourself. I've went out with my brother and a friend who owns a Nikon, and we took 4 images, one from each camera at 45 millimeter in RAW, tripoded, of my brother in 9 different situations. And so just kind of give a variety. It was cold out, so we were a little pressed for time. We were outside. It was about 30 degrees Fahrenheit, and it was windy. So we kind of worked as fast as we could because our fingers were going numb. So one thing to note is the Fuji was shot at 16-bit. These other cameras are at 14-bit. And so, JPEGs 8-bit, HEFs are 10. And so most cameras are in RAW are 14-bit. With the GFX, you get that extra 2 bits, which I'll flash up on the screen, representation of how many colors are available to process in those different bit formats. You're not going to, you're going to export a JPEG, so it's not really going to matter in the end, other than the fact that it allows you to push your images further prior to exporting them as a JPEG. So you can push your image farther before the colors start to bleed or things start to get weird. So try that out. I put a lot of color in these images. And so we kind of shot with a situation similar to this in the background. So you can kind of push that and just see what it does. So yeah, beyond that, this is up to you to decide. And then to this video, just put in the comments, all caps, the manufacturer you use, and then maybe a description of why. It'd just be fun to know for everybody, kind of see what people are using. Off the bat, if someone is watching this video to pick out and decide they want me to tell you what camera to pick, I would say Sony probably, based off of not just color, but just the lens options, the autofocus, the ergonomics, probably the best all around. Sony has improved their color science quite a bit. I think that the 33 megapixel sensor that's in the A7 IV and the A7C2 is my favorite. I've used the A7 R5, and I'm just not the biggest fan of those colors when I compare them to the Canon R5 or the GFX. Nikon, I don't have a whole lot of experience with. I used D750s for a while and got great images, and there's some Nikon followers or photographers that I follow and love. And I think that they all make great cameras and in fact, good color science. But when it comes to focus, GFX horrible. And I'm not going to go to APS-C for professional work. But the image quality is phenomenal, so it's a good supplemental camera. Canon is also a great option. It's just, their lens lineup, it's very minimal. And then I don't know much about Nikon these days, sorry. But yeah, I think Sony is just kind of winning there. So let's jump into the computer. I want to walk you through on how, if you don't know, to use color profiles, and that way it just gives you the tools and the ability to kind of go through, apply your own presets, see what fits for you, and just kind of like get an idea of what these color differences are. So we started out with my brother with just some daylights, cloudy. And so if we go in here, top right, we've got these little boxes. We click there, and these are going to be the film simulations that are in camera. And so I shoot in a soft so that when I'm photographing, I just get that instant feedback of what my image is going to look like in the end, which is kind of nice. So if I click a soft, my favorite, we click white balance with W. And if I just pick the point, probably the brightest point here to kind of get a good reading, our starting point for white balance, about there. We'll just add some strong contrast, brighten it up a little bit, and just kind of zoom in on his skin. And just going to adjust that a little bit. Cool. I think that looks great. That's a great image. And we'll move on next to that is Fuji. And you'll see that crop factor, quite a significant amount of field of view that we lost there. So, all right, so let's just add curve here. This is Canon. I color coded these. Green is Fuji, red is Canon, yellow is Nikon, and blue is Sony. So here we have some different options, not a lot, but we've got neutral, portrait. I'll generally use neutral for the most part. Faithful is great too. So let's just click on neutral. Close that, and then just kind of adjust a little bit. Just manually do this white balance. So I think that just looks great right there. And then let's head over to Nikon and see what they have to offer. We'll add contrast first. I have my own tone curves I use, but just for simplicity, we'll use this. So they've got flats, landscape, neutral, portrait, standard. Go with standard on this one. And it's one thing I just kind of noticed a little bit is I feel like, I don't know if it's just the profiles, but Nikon's just like a little more like, I don't know how to describe it. I won't say muddy, but just different. Not that's a bad thing. It always depends, you know, on the type of image you're going for. You're going for something light and airy, filmy, punchy. That's going to help you pick. So apply your own presets. All right, so there we go. So Nikon, I'm not super experienced with, but for now, there's that. And then we're going to go to Sony. Strong contrast, and then, oops, go up here. And we've got FL. I don't know what that is. I don't like it. It's weird. Neutral, portrait, standard. I'll probably just pick standard. And bring it up a little bit. Cool. All right, so I'm just gonna show you all those. That's just a really quick edit. For some reason this is brighter. I think there might be a profile going on in the background to lighten up the edges for the lens. Yeah, so just kind of see there is a difference. Like I was just a mild edit, white balance slightly, but there's going to be, those are different. You can see it. So go through, mess around with these. We've got some backlit images. I shot backlit, and then I also underexposed, because sometimes underexposing an image and having to bring it up and push that image harder is going to affect the colors as well, especially at high ISO. That's a given. These are all at 100 ISO. And then we did some direct light, just so you can see some direct sunlight. Maybe slightly diffused by a cloud, but pretty direct. He was squinting. And then some backlit with some green trees. You know, the biggest thing for me is how these are going to look on skin, because I photograph people. You know, you can get away with a lot more if you don't have people in the scene, but once you add people, you got to combat that skin tone with the background. And so over hundreds of thousands of images, I've found that Canon and Fuji have been my favorite. You know, I don't have 100,000 images with the new Sony 33 megapixel sensor, but I've been trying to get as many images as I can with personal work or personal family stuff, so I can get a good basis in different situations. I do find that the high ISO in this 33 megapixel sensor is pretty phenomenal. Also finding that it looks like Sony images are just a little over sharpened. Not that that's a bad thing, but they're sharp. You know, it's, you know, it's all preference, but it's just something I've noticed. We went in the studio, we photographed with a daylight on his arms and daylight on the key light, and then a reflector, so pretty neutral. And then we photographed with daylight on my brother's face and 2800K in the background, just to spotlight, and then 2800K on the sides. And so you kind of have like a little bit of a mixed light in this one. And then here we just did similar situation with this light, just kind of like this, just different, you know, some kind of reddish pink and blue, and then daylight on his face. And then a situation I find myself pretty much on every wedding day is warm light inside, cold light coming out from, 56K coming from outside, and like 28K or 33K warm light coming from the inside. So I want to see, and this is also at 1000 ISO, what happens when we start pushing these images in bad situations. So these are all going to look great in good light, but what happens when we get into bad light? I find that Canon does a little bit better at maintaining that neutral balance. The Fuji's great too. Sony's okay, and Nikon I don't have a lot of experience with. But look through these images. Let me know if this is helpful. If it is, like and subscribe so that I can make more videos. This has been fun for me to just have an outlet to, a reason to test gear and give my thoughts and why I like certain things. But yeah, I'm fortunate to be able to play with all these. It's super fun, and I'd like to continue to try out more gear. And yeah, if this is helpful, again, let me know. And thanks for watching.